Thank you, Lisa. What a beautiful reminder. There is only love. And in Unity, we look at God is love. And one of our affirmations in Unity, there's only one presence, one power, God the good, active in my life. So we know that that love is active in our world. Well, the title of my talk that I'm giving today is The Truth with a capital T about you. The truth with a capital T about you. And I'm using material from a book that was written by Lowell Fillmore. Now, Lowell Fillmore was the oldest of the Fillmore boys, and he was the president of the Unity School for over 50 years. He had written over 3,000 articles for the Weekly Unity. I remember talking to Phil Pearson about how Lowell Fillmore was kind of a quiet and unassuming guy, but he managed Unity by walking around. He visited all the people at the village there, and he was an instrumental part of keeping this Unity message going and growing throughout these years. And this one book that I like, that I'm using, is called The Prayer Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. Health, Wealth, and Prayer Way. And as a licensed teacher, in fact, I taught this as an elective course. And I like using Unity books. And first of all, it keeps it focused on a Unity message. And also maybe it'll spur some interest in these, what they call the Unity classic library books. I know as a licensed teacher, boy, I was really into Unity and I was devouring these Unity classic books. So, and you don't have to even go out and buy one. If you get on truthunity.net, truthunity, one word, .net, Reverend Mark Hicks, and he was just ordained, he was a licensed teacher, has put together a wonderful website with all some of these Unity treasures that you can download and have for free. And there's a PDF of this exact book that if you want to, if it spurs your interest and you want to check it out more, truthunity.net, and look for this book up by Lowell Fillmore. Well, Lowell starts off saying, the most interesting subject that a man can study is himself. Realizing this, the ancients placed over one of their temples the inscription, know thyself, know thyself. And Lowell's pointing to the, the important part of knowing us, what we're all about. And I know that that motto had appeared on one of these ancient temples. So thanks to our internet, I checked it on out. And it was at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. And they had actually three mottos up on the top: know thyself, nothing to excess, and certainty brings insanity. No, but the last one, I'm not so sure. Certainty brings insanity. Nothing to excess, I can agree with that. Sometimes, if one is good, two must be better was a philosophy I had earlier in life, and that kind of got me in a world of hurt. But this idea of knowing yourself. Now, Pliny, an ancient philosopher, had talked about these mottos, reminding the people that are coming to the temple to get an oracle that was spoke to them, that they, first of all, needed to know themselves. Because if you didn't know yourself, you really couldn't understand what the oracle was all about. And I think the most important question is, who are you? Who are you? And knowing ourselves, that we can do that, that we are wise enough. One of the 12 powers that Lisa's song talks about is the power of wisdom. We get to tap into that in our life, and then tap into that power of understanding to understand what we just got delivered to us. I think it's important to listen to some of these ancient maxims or whatever. I know in my college years, this thing of to thine own self be true. I believe it comes from a Shakespeare play, to thine own self be true, kind of resonated with me. And when I was a junior in college, I was a physical education major, and I had a social studies minor. And I decided to take this junior level class. I was a junior level class in juvenile delinquency. And my advisor, who was also my wrestling coach, says, Brach, what are you doing? You could end up having 2 hours of F and be on probation and not be able to wrestle. I said, look, coach, I think I know what I'm doing. And anyway, I signed up for this class. I showed up, and I was the only physical education major there. Everybody else was a sociology major. And this professor says, I'm treating this like a graduate level class. Here's the books that you have to do. I'm breaking you up into groups. You're going to meet during the 10 weeks of the quarter, discuss these books, and your grade will be based upon this interview that you have at the end of the term with me. I said, well, okay. Well, I showed up at the first group meeting and I was kind of like a fish out of water. Everybody else is a social major and I'm this phys ed major and they're talking about all these different things. I didn't understand what they're talking about. And, I was on the wrestling team. I was working part-time at this food store, unloading food trucks and stocking shelves. I was a physical education major. And of course, on the weekends, we have our college parties. And, the class that got the short shrift was this juvenile delinquency class. And come the end of the term, I go up for my interview with this professor and he says, well, Mr. Brach, tell me about so-and-so's theory of this and this. And, I had read the Cliff Note version of these books, and I finally said, look, Doc, I'm a physical education major. I'm on the wrestling team. I work part-time at this food store unloading trucks and stocking shelves. I left out the part about the parties, but he kind of figured that would be a physical education major activity. And he looked at me and he says, Mr. Brach, if you've learned one thing from this class, to thine own self be true, that's enough. And he says, you're excused. That's it. I went, oh my God, the coach was right. 2 hours of math coming up. I can just see it. So anyway, I went home and at the end of the term, they sent out a notice that the grades were being posted. So this was at the University of Illinois at Chicago Circle, and the admin buildings were up on this top hill of this big tall tower. So I climbed the hill, got in the elevator, rode up to the 10th floor, went down to the associate department, looked on the bulletin board. And that's when they didn't put your name up there. They only had your social security number. And I found my social security number, come across, I got a C. Oh my God, there is a God in heaven. Yes. And I'm skipped down the hallway, floated down the elevator. As I'm going out, who's coming in but this professor? And I said, well, good morning, professor. He says, hello, Mr. Brach. He said, did you see your grade? I said, yes, sir, I did. And I said, thank you. And he looks me right in the eye and he says, you're welcome. He had given me a gift of a gentleman's hook, a C, so I didn't have to go on probation because I was truthful with him and told him that I really skipped through that, the work that he assigned. So these old maxims can really do it. So know thyself, like Lowell is pointing to. And Lowell continues with this. He says, you cannot conceive of God as being anything less than good. Therefore, you, having been made in his image and likeness, must be fundamentally good. You may not realize that you are good. Your friends and relatives may not believe it. And some of them may even think you are otherwise. Nevertheless, the spiritual pattern of God's idea shines through you, confirming the truth that you are perfect in spirit. So Lowell is reminding us, sometimes we don't think that good of ourselves. And I know we tend to be hard on ourselves and we're doing something. Oh, we could have done that better. I could have done this. I could have done that. And, our family and friends may say, oh, look at her or look at him. He thinks they're God's gift to the world. And they think something different of us. But he's reminding us being made in the image and likeness of spirit, And so we just have to remember that, regardless of what's going on in the world. Several years ago, I was doing investigations. I was a background investigator. I was doing backgrounds for the people getting their security clearances for the federal government. And that entailed me to go around to where people worked, and I had a little release, and I would look at their work records. I'd interview people that work with them. I would interview people that lived next to them in their neighborhoods and so on, and do police checks and whatever. And this one day I was up in the foothills, up in this big rural area, which is kind of hard to find neighbors nearby to interview and talk. And boy, I'd kind of had an unfruitful morning chasing around trying to find somebody that knew this gentleman that I was doing his background for. So I was getting kind of feeling down, I was feeling lonely, I was feeling hungry. And I went down to the next local town to get something to eat. And it was a nice little small restaurant. And when I went in, I sat over in the back up by the wall. And apparently, well, actually it wasn't a wall. It was a picture window that somebody had broken, and they put this big wood piece of wood up there to kind of cover where the broken window was. And of course, people had got in there and written things on this blank wood place. And up there in the corner, when I looked up, somebody had written with a black Sharpie pencil this: "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for your good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for your good and not for disaster, to give you a future with hope." And boy, that little verse of scripture from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, really spoke to my heart that day. And, I had made all these plans. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and whatever. And, I was into a spirituality and going to this one church. And boy, that really resonated with me, that God is working into it. And I think Spirit speaks to us in diverse ways and means. And this diverse ways and means was a handwritten message by somebody, Sharpie, of a quote from Jeremiah. But also Spirit can speak to us through emails, through phone calls from friends. It can speak to you through totems. That's one of the things I like to look. Like this morning, I was going out to feed our neighbor's cat, who's down in Santa Barbara, and Margie and I have been taking care of this cat. And I noticed that there were 3 doves on our front lawn, and I didn't normally see that. I went, "Oh, Mom, maybe that's a totem for me." What's the symbolism of a dove? Well, peacefulness and whatever, because I don't normally see them here in our downtown area or midtown area of Sacramento. So when things show up in your life, maybe take a look at it. And particularly if it's an animal totem. I remember one time I was coming home from Missouri in our home when we lived there, and we're going through ministerial school. And there's this big tortoise walking up our lawn, or our walkway to our house. And I said, wow, what's the symbol of that? So I looked it up, and sure enough, it was about making decisions and taking your time. And I was coming towards the end of my ministerial school about what should I be doing? So these signs may be pointing to you in the right direction. They may be warning you of impeding difficulties, or they may be showing you a different way. So being open and receptive to the ways that Spirit speaks to you. Lowell had continued on in his chapter saying, no matter what mistakes, and I like to think of mistakes as 2 words, mistakes. No matter what mistakes you have made, or what disappointment thoughts you may hold concerning yourself, or what others may have said against you, you are in truth inherently good. Another reminder of being good. It says you are dependable, you're able to spread blessings everywhere and make people happy wherever you go. Because the Spirit of God in you is the source of your life that you are. Reminding us that, we do good. A lot of times we can think, oh man, am I really helping anybody? And, I teach yoga, and it's interesting in yoga. I say, all right, let's sweep our hands up, grab some namaste, blue sky energy, and bring it down. And when everybody swoops it up, and sometimes when I'm speaking on Sunday, he's speaking these words on. I say, well, are they getting the thought that I want? But anyway, I know it's being planted, and Spirit works wonderful with this. And sometimes these little events that happen in our life can be life-changing events. I came across a story of Ben Franklin, one of our founding fathers. Now, when Ben Franklin was a little guy, they had a birthday party for him. And he, as a present, got 6 pennies, 6 cents. Well, that 6 cents burned a hole in Ben Franklin's young pocket. I can identify with that. Gotta buy some. So he ran to the store, and he went in, and there was this whistle there. And the shopkeeper says, son, do you have money? He said, well, I have 6 pennies. And he said, I like that whistle. So, of course, the shopkeeper sold him that whistle for his 6 pennies. Well, Ben Franklin brought it home, and boy, it was his pride and joy. He was blowing it all around the house. It drove his family and his friends nuts. And they said, where did you get that? And he said, well, I bought it. And they said, well, how much did you pay for that? So I paid 6 pennies. And they said, you paid 4 times too much. Well, that little thought really resonated with young Ben, saying, I let my emotions run away with me, and I wasn't thinking or thoughtful when I bought this whistle. I think that's where they get the term penny whistle. But anyhow, that thought came with him. And as he went through the rest of his life, when he'd bump up against people who were kind of reacting from their emotions due into anxiety and fear, he would say to themselves, or even saying out loud, they paid too much for their whistle. They weren't listening to that interior voice. Lowell continues on with one of our our principles saying this: as a matter of fact, when you begin to think about good things that are yours by divine right, these things begin to unfold and expand in your life. Remember that you have an inner spiritual strength. Wow. Why in Unity don't we say thoughts held in mind produce after their kind? I know I've seen that, and sometimes I'll get a desire, and I look at desire, D from the Father, desire, and all of a sudden those thoughts will start to materialize. And I think, well, maybe I'm supposed to get that. Maybe I'm supposed to do that. And if it's a God thought, if I show up, it's there and it's easy flows. If I'm supposed to be doing something, people answer the phone, emails are answered. If it's a Bob thought, well, maybe things aren't working out so good. But Lowell's reminding us that our thoughts are creative. And listening to that story and listening to that guidance from Spirit, I'm reminded of a story from the Hebrew Bible. I'm also the Bible teacher for the Unity Urban Ministerial School. In each 10-week term, I teach a New Testament and an Old Testament class. And one of the Old Testament stories that sticks in my mind is a story about Balaam and the talking donkey. Balaam and the talking donkey. And that resonates because I had a donkey. He would bray, but he wouldn't talk. And his name was Jerusalem. I adopted him from the Stanislaus animal shelter and brought him home. And it was a little before Christmas. And I thought, I think I'll call him Jerusalem. So anyway, the story about Balaam and the talking donkey in the book of Numbers in chapter 22. Now, Balaam was a prophet or a soothsayer of the Midianites. He was not an Israelite. He was a foreigner. And Balak was a king of Moab. Now, Balak was going to hire Balaam to come and curse the Israelites because he was fearful about getting in a battle with the Israelites because the Israelites were winning. So he was warned by Yahweh about this coming thing. But anyway, when the messengers from Balak showed up, Balaam next morning saddles his donkey and heads on off with these messengers to go to the king of the Moabites, Balak. And Yahweh was not too happy with Balaam doing this. So as they come to this one part of the trail, there's an angel with a flaming sword appeared before him. Balaam didn't see it, but the donkey did. So the donkey veers off the path into the field. Well, Balaam was a little upset with the donkey. He started beating on the donkey, pulling it back to the trail. He goes on a little further. Again, this angel with a flaming sword appears again. And this time the donkey bumps over by this brick wall and bashes Balaam's foot against the wall. Of course, Balaam is angry at this and he hits the donkey again. And they go on a little further on the trail, and now it's very narrow. They can't even get by on the other side. And this angel is standing there with a flaming sword ready to kill Balaam. The donkey looks up and sees it and just lays down flat. Well, Balaam is really upset and starts beating on the donkey. Now Yahweh gives the donkey the power of speech and says, "Why are you beating me? Haven't I been your faithful donkey all these past years and taken you wherever you want? And why are you beating me 3 times like this?" And Yahweh gives the power of sight to Balaam, and he looks up and he sees this angel with the flaming sword that the donkey had seen all along. And the angel says, "Yahweh is upset with you for going to do this thing." And he says, "Well, should I go home or change?" And he says, "No, but you only speak what Yahweh says." So when he gets up to the Moabite kingdom, instead of cursing the Israelites, he blesses them. And of course, that was not too happy with the king of Moab. But anyway, looking at this story, we can look at these Bible stories 2 ways. Is there a moral story? Well, yeah, perhaps Balaam should have been listening to his donkey, his animal nature. Or can we look at it metaphysically, where each one of those aspects represents some part of our consciousness? Is there a Balaam part of our consciousness? Is there a Balak, or the king consciousness in it? And there's the animal consciousness from it? I think so. If Balaam was looking for some material gain, and he was a spiritual person, but he was setting his materiality, and he got on his sense nature, his donkey, and went after it. So isn't that true sometimes when we think we're being so spiritual and we pursue these material gains? And things come up to kind of warn us on what we should be doing. Where went off the path with the donkey. So sometimes we're going on our path and we end up somewhere we don't think we should be. Or maybe we bumped our foot and had a little injury and about along the path, and wow, what's going on here? And finally, it may just give out entirely, like the donkey did. And we have to turn and listen to Spirit, say, wow, where am I really going? And revisiting and maybe taking that word trust from our daily word today and trust that Spirit has a right and perfect way for us. Another line that caught my attention in Lowell's book is, discouragement is a hobgoblin that people have made out of their imagination. Discouragement is a hobgoblin that people have made out of their power of imagination. Wow, well, that was one of the powers that was in Lisa's song, our power of imagination. And discouragement. Now, sometimes we're imagining things and then we take that negative side and we say, oh my God, that'll never happen. I'm too old for this. I don't have enough training for that, and whatever. And a hobgoblin. Now, I had to do a little research. What is a hobgoblin? Well, it's small, hairy little men who, like their close relatives, the brownies, are often found in human dwellings, and they do things at night while the people are asleep. But unlike brownies, who are good and do stuff, the hobgoblins are kind of mischievous and they like to play tricks on you. So Lowell is reminding us that our power of imagination, which is one of the things that sparks what we're going to do in life, coupled with our power of will to put it into action, can be if we let it go the wrong way, it can be discouraging. The last quote that he has is, have you set your faith on God, or have you turned it on personal schemes? If your faith is in God and the personal scheme is a secondary consideration, you're safe. Because even if the scheme fails, you still have God. So, it's okay to have these little personal things, but, placing that trust in Spirit. And I came across two stories that kind of pointed about what happens when we place ourselves in personal and maybe not listen to those messages that may be coming from Spirit. Around the turn of the century, there's a man who lived on Long Island, and he sent away to New York City for this barometer. It was a really expensive barometer, and when it finally showed up, he opened it up out of the box, and the barometer was pointing to hurricane. And he looked around and he said, boy, it was beautiful weather. There's no hurricane here. Well, the next day it's still pointing towards hurricane. Well, he was so upset. He thought he was being taken advantage of, that he dashed off a letter, mailed it off. And that's how we know that he sent a letter, because the hurricane came through and wiped out him and his house. So was he listening to Spirit, to speaking to a weather vane, or was he not? His personal scheme. And another one, there's a gentleman named Victor Khayyam. There's a story about Victor Khayyam on a commercial years ago holding up a Remington shaver saying, I liked this so much that I bought the company. And Remington shavers was a real going concern. Well, one of his friends told him about another product that he may be interested in, but he kind of balked on that and said, no, I really couldn't do that. And it turned into a personal thing. Well, the product that he turned down was Velcro. Became a $1 billion industry, bigger than Remington. So were these guys listening to weather instruments or their friends, or was it that personal thing that came into their minds? And as we move through our day, are we listening to Spirit? Are we listening to that personal agenda that we have? Well, let's kind of wrap this all up, and let's take a look at what we looked at. We looked at the concept of know thyself and where it appeared on a temple, and how we can apply that in our own life today. Looked at a quote from Jeremiah about the plans that God has for us, and they're plans for good and not for disaster. We had an example of some of the mistakes in our life, like our founding father, Ben Franklin, did. And it kind of served him later on as he went through life and realizing that people caught up in their fear and anxiety may be paid too much for their whistle. And lastly, a comment about hobgoblins and imagination. And I came across one other thought for the day. It was in my little devotionals that come across, and it's from an ancient philosopher. So sometimes we hurry and scurry and do stuff. And this ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said this: nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Namaste, dear ones. It's been a pleasure being here with you. Thank you very much. And now some